We got more NFL news and notes. Johnny Mack is in the house. We've got NFL news and notes brought to you by BMW Atlantic City. The ultimate driving experience is closer than you think at BMWAtlanticCity.com off exit 36 on the Garden State Parkway. And we will be live at the NFL Draft next Thursday. John McMullen will be there with us as well, and he joins us with a look. We want all the wins and losses right now, John, from week 1 down. Get off my lawn. What's going on, man?
Are we live?
This segment is live for those of you listening.
Yeah, you know how I feel about that. It's an exercise in futility, but
no, but I thought you did a really good job.
Fun.
I thought you did a really good job at 97.3 ESPN.com with your story on the Eagles' schedule and the quirks, and there are some things. Forget the teams. Take the teams out. You've got 3-game road trips. You got the bye. You got 4 out of 5 on the road. You got back-to-back West Coasties there. So there are some nuggets that you can take from the schedule that don't have to do with how many games you may win and how many games you may lose.
Yeah, I think every team in the league sort of always has that 3-game stretch where they complain. And I think talking to people who've done the schedule in the past, it's always, you know, they're happy when 32 teams and 32 owners and TV networks are unhappy, because that means they're being kind of fair. And everybody obviously nitpicks their favorite team and has issues with certain parts of it. But that late, 3-game road trip for the Eagles would be the one I would point out for Philadelphia that's going to be difficult. There's no question about it, but every team's got to go through that.
John, there's a 6-game run in the middle of the season that features non-playoff teams. Now, I know you look at it and say, well, it's Arizona, it's Carolina, 2 teams that were NFC favorites last year, but there's a 6-game run right there, right smack in the middle of the year that were non-playoff teams. That could be a very telling stretch leading you into your bye week that gets you to that back end that you just referred to.
Yeah, that's true. But there's always, in Carolina is a perfect example. There's always, we all thought they were going to be set up for a pretty long run after going 15-1 and having some significant talent on both sides of the football. And all of a sudden, they're first to worst. And it happens every year in this league, both directions. First to worst, worst to first.
That had to be the most surprising one, though, right? Carolina, you just said 15-1 to go from 15-1 to last place. I thought that was the most surprising story almost of last year.
Yeah, I mean, it started in the offseason with the Josh Norman mess, and they screwed that up. And it sort of, the snowball started going downhill, and I for that reason, there's a lot of the same players. Cam Newton, obviously, we have to see about his health, but that's a team I expect to bounce back this year. If Cam is healthy and ready to go in 100% by week 1, I think they're going to be a pretty good football team, and that's an example where if you're going to go off last season and you say Carolina's going to be easy, I don't agree with you.
John, there's 5 primetime games on the schedule. What does that say about the Eagles, a team that went 7-9 last season?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have always been relatively high profile, basically since the Andy Reid days, and I think that continues. And there's a significant fan base here, and there's a reason they're on primetime so much. And you could argue the entire NFC East. Dallas, obviously, I think they have 9. The Giants and the Eagles, specifically, high-profile teams, and they're in prime time a lot, and that continues for the Eagles. And it'll even get more and more and more as they get more successful.
And one of those primetime games is a Christmas night game. They're going to play Monday night, Christmas night against the Raiders. I don't know how you as a journalist feels about having to work Christmas night, but I'm wondering, we put the poll question out there for the fans yesterday. They seem to like it.
Yeah, I'm trying to fend off the divorce lawyers for one more year, and they don't make it easy. Every time you got to work on it. Thanksgiving. Now we got Thanksgiving in the NFL because I have to do national stuff and Christmas Day. And But I covered the NBA for a long time, and obviously Christmas Day is huge for the NBA as well. It's just the nature of the job, and people don't get interested in our complaints, but it's certainly not. It doesn't make you happy. Let's put it that way.
No, and a lot of the fans, we put that poll question up yesterday, whether or not you like to see that Christmas night game. They're going to play Christmas night. They're also going to play New Year's Eve against Dallas. So there's a possibility, John, that they could have a New Year's Eve night game if that game means something. By the way, 63% said yes, they like the Christmas night game. 37% said definitely not a fan of the Christmas night game. But what about a Dallas New Year's Eve that we know could be flexed into a Sunday nighter?
Yeah, I mean, that could be really, really big. Let's face it. I don't expect Dallas to be quite as dominant as they were last season. And I think right now in early stages, you have to say Dallas and the Giants would be the two favorites in the division. But I sort of think Dallas is going to come back to the pack a little bit, and the Eagles are going to improve a little bit. And who knows? That could be a really, really important game. And obviously that would make things tremendously exciting.
John McMullen with us here. How about that L.A.-Seattle back-to-back? I know the Eagles were lobbying for 2 games in California or the Pacific Northwest, but they weren't necessarily looking for L.A.-Seattle. That back-to-back, are the Eagles happy with that setup?
Right, they were trying to go L.A., right? They wanted to stay in L.A.
They wanted to go.
Right.
Yeah, Chargers Rams. But, at least you can stay out on the West Coast, which I imagine they will do. And it's better than nothing. It would have been perfect if it was the Chargers and Rams, but you can imagine if they didn't have any, if they were all standalone trips and you had to go to Seattle, Chargers, Rams, each with buffers in between. So it's not everything they wanted, but it's better than the worst case scenario.
So give our listeners a little. You said something about that. You said a little earlier that you've talked to someone who helps make a schedule. Are these guys like in a room with a lab coat on?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, because they're not only dealing with teams and their sport. There's always other activities that they have to take into account. I used the Pope visiting Philadelphia recently as an example. So you don't want the Eagles in town when that happened. And there's always things going on, big events elsewhere in the country, and they have to enter that all in the equation. Then you have the Jets and the Giants who share a stadium. It's interesting because the Chargers and the Rams are eventually going to share a stadium, but 3 times they're going to be playing at the same time. They're not going to have that luxury soon. So it's really difficult logistically. And that's why they say when they see everybody's upset and complaining, they know they've done their job because it's relatively fair. Whereas you have teams that are ecstatic and other teams that are very angry, you probably haven't done your job.
I saw that. John McMullen with us talking about the Eagles schedule out in the NFL. The Rams sharing that Coliseum with USC football. The Chargers sharing their StubHub Center with the Galaxy. And they have these back-to-back games where obviously the field crew is going to have a long night. But the map of the parking was, L.A., California parking anyway is a nightmare. They basically said, good luck getting to the games.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, Carson and the Coliseum, they're not that close together, so that helps. But anybody who's tried to drive in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area, it's just a mess to begin with when nothing's going on. So, it's not going to be the best case scenario. But as you mentioned, Pete, when you have to deal with the StubHub Center is really, an MLS stadium. The Chargers are the second tenant, and obviously.
Think about that. The Chargers are the second tenant
to an MLS team.
30,000 seat MLS stadium. Thanks for coming.
Well, trust me, they're going to generate more money, but it's not their stadium.
In 1 week.
I mean,
in a preseason game. They will bring more money in one preseason game than the MLS team. Although, I guess in San Diego, the MLS is probably a little bit more popular, right? I'm probably shortchanging them.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Relatively, I mean, the Union, I cover every once in a while for 973. You'd be surprised. I mean, that place is packed.
No, I know they draw well. The Union
more
draw
often
well.
than not. But, yeah, I mean, the ticket, obviously, the tickets are cheaper. It's a more affordable product for a family. And a lot of these soccer-specific stadiums have been sort of popping up around the country because it's got a niche popularity.
Sure.
But yeah, obviously it can't compare to the NFL. I mean, that's just realism. But the weird situation with the Chargers is, again, it's a temporary home, and it's not theirs. So you have to deal with the scheduling of MLS, and that's just another thing you have to throw into the equation for the schedule makers.
So, John, we'll dive back into the Eagles' schedule and take a note that their bye week is in Week 10. Last year they were in Week 4. You think the players like Week 10 a little better for where the bye week falls?
Yeah, it's always better. You'd like to have the bye week as late as possible because you're generally banged up and you could use the week off later, whereas you're still going on pretty high cylinders early in the season, especially the Eagles last year getting off to the 3-0 start. The last thing they wanted to do was shut it down at that point. So I think that's any team is happier when that bye is later in the season.
John McMullen, we're looking at the Eagles schedule. You can check out more on his piece at 973ESPN.com. He's got the breakdown of the entire schedule. And no, he does not play the win-loss game in that piece.
It's his favorite game. But
he does have a lot of great scheduling notes, including Denver. We had a guy text in, John, we're having a chance to pick your trip where a player, a listener can pick whatever road game. He said he wants to go get high in Denver. Unfortunately, he can't have that happen this year. The Broncos are playing here.
Yeah, they're playing here. So,
which is good, though, for the Eagles because, as you note, the Eagles are 5-1 against Denver in Philadelphia. Playing the West in both the NFC and the AFC did the Eagles and the NFC East no favors because Dallas, Philadelphia, New York, or Washington, if you look at their schedules, they're going to go through a gauntlet, all four of those teams.
Well, anytime, obviously you play one division and it rotates in the AFC on your schedule. And the best division in the AFC right now is the AFC West with three really good teams. And I think for the most part, even San Diego's a little bit underrated because anytime you got to deal with Phillip Rivers, and I called him San Diego, I'm going to do that a lot, but the Los Angeles Chargers. Anytime you got to deal with him, it's always a danger. But I mean, that's a division that had two playoff teams, and the Broncos won Super Bowl 50. And if they had better quarterback play, they probably would have been in the mix for Super Bowl 51. So it's just a really, really good division.
Hey, by the way, no Cleveland or Jacksonville on the Thursday night tilts this year. They do get the 9:30 London games, the two of those, but no Cleveland or Jacksonville. It seemed that the league was a lot more conscious of trying to get better primetime games this year. And I also noticed, John, that it looks like there's a lot of division matchups packed in early in the year. I mean, Giants, Cowboys again. You've got Eagles, Redskins kicking off the season. Eagles play the Giants in Week 3. It seems like they want to get this season off to a good start and build some momentum early.
Well, that's been the divisional part of it's been a couple-year trend, and you generally play them in September and December. The December part of it is to discourage tanking or any trying to lose games or not going out to try to win them late in the season because, in theory, you're never going to want to lose to a division rival. And I think it has worked out pretty well. There was always – and I talked with Pete about this. There was always unofficial rules with the NFL, and one of them was everybody gets their turn on Thursday night because nobody likes playing on Thursday night. But I think they're concerned with the drop in TV ratings, and you don't want the Cleveland Browns and Jacksonville Jaguars playing primetime games because it's going to hurt the ratings.
John, I think
until they get good, and who knows when that will be.
John, I think I read somewhere that the Eagles are playing no games against teams that are coming off the bye. That was a big topic last year where they were playing something almost like 5 games of teams that were coming off byes. Am I correct in thinking that the Eagles aren't facing a team that's coming off a bye?
That is correct, and I think that's a little bit overplayed. I mean, there's certain teams, Andy Reid, obviously, here. I think for that reason, people kind of overrate it because he had so much success when he had extra time to prepare. It can work both ways. Like I said with the Eagles, Minnesota was 5-0 coming off the bye, and they came here to Philadelphia, and they lost, and the floor kind of fell out from under them. So when you're hot, the last thing you want to do is go on a bye week. So teams can handle it either way. I mean, probably the better coach you have, the better prepared is going to help you. But there's other teams where it doesn't help them at all.
John, of course, the draft coming up, and that means there's a possibility that Howie still has moves up his sleeve. Do you think there's a player on the current roster that could still be traded on Thursday?
Oh, yeah, I think there's a possibility even Michael Kendricks gets traded before Thursday, but certainly I expect him to be traded by the end of the weekend, most likely for a late-round pick. I think you can put that at higher than 50%, that's probably going to happen, and I still think there's a chance Jason Kelsey has moved. Less of a chance. You probably put that a little bit less than 50-50, but I think those are the two logical candidates, and I would say it's more likely than not that Michael Kendricks is not an Eagle by the end of the weekend.
What's the compensation return for him, in your opinion?
Well, because of his salary, I would say probably a conditional 7th-round pick, or it might even be a 7th-round pick if you're trying to get it this year.
How about that?
If you're willing to accept it next season, you can probably put conditions on it and get it kicked up to a 6th or maybe even a 5th rounder if he develops into a starter, but not much because of his salary and the fact that teams around the league saw he didn't play for the Eagles last year, so there's not going to be people beating down the door for him.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. The schedules are released. You can check the Eagles out at 97.3ESPN.com and get John's breakdown. No wins and losses, just some anecdotes, some things that you can kind of read about. You know, the Eagles play 4 out of 5 games after their bye week will be on the road, 2 of which will be on the West Coast, and then they finish out the year with 2 home games, one on Christmas night, the other one on New Year's Eve. They've got a stretch in the middle of the year where they'll play 6 straight teams that failed to make the playoffs last year. So you got that as well. So a lot of interesting things. The scheduled day. Hey, when the NFL gives you something, make the most of it. Right, John?
That's right. The one league, for all the criticism this league gets, the one thing you cannot criticize them for is they have set up their schedule to be a year-round thing where everybody's always talking about the NFL. And that's because there's always something going on.
That's right. And we've got it all going on right here. And you can get us 24/7. John McMullen, 97.3ESPN.com, at JF McMullen on Twitter. And don't forget his national NFL coverage at FanRag Sports NFL. John, have a great weekend. We are into draft mode full-fledged starting Monday.
Hey, thank you, guys. Enjoy the weekend.